Hey guys, welcome to my first Honda video on the channel. This is the all-new 2023 Civic Type R, codenamed FL5, and apparently it shares a lot of its components and parts with the previous 2017 FK8. But thankfully, for me at least, it looks a lot better. It's been dressed down. You still know it's a Honda Civic Type R. It's lower, it's wider, it's longer. I wouldn't say it looks like your typical hatchback, but I'm sure it's going to be a lot of fun to drive. But that would be no surprise because the Type R has always been apparently a really good driver's car, maybe apart from the FN2, which had mixed opinions. I say apparently because I've never driven a Type R before. In fact, the only Honda I think I've ever driven off memory is my brother's Honda Jazz out in Australia a few years ago. So this is going to be all new to me. R stands for racing, by the way, and underneath this bonnet we'll find a 2-litre 4-pot turbocharged engine, very similar to the unit that was in the previous FK8. But they have played around with some of the hardware and some of the software, and it now produces 329 horsepower and 420 newton meters of torque. And all of that goes through a 6-speed manual gearbox and the front axle alone, which is quite unusual. I'm more of a rear-wheel drive guy. These days I drive a lot of all-wheel drive cars, but I do love a front-wheel drive car, especially a hot hatch, because that's kind of where they originated. But it'll be interesting, especially in this weather, to see if we can get any of that power and torque down through its rather trick setup. It wasn't so many years ago where we thought 200 horsepower was more than enough for the front axle to cope with. Over the years, Honda have developed a very trick front axle, which should hopefully allow us to get some traction on the road route and when we get out on track a little bit later. Honda claim on a dry day in perfect conditions, it will do the 0 to 60 sprint in just 5.4 seconds, which is very impressive for a front-wheel drive manual car. Before we jump in and take it on the road route, I just want to discuss price because I think that's the real sticking point here. This retails at £47,000, and that's before this fancy paintwork, which is a hell of a lot of money, especially when you compare it to Audi's S3, which is £8,000 less in base form, BMW's M135i, which is about £6,000 less, and even Volkswagen Golf's R is about £4,000 less than this. But AMG's A35 is only £1,000 or so less expensive. And I am told that this car comes with a lot more standard equipment than any of those and a little bit more power and therefore hopefully a bit more performance. Let's not waste any more time and jump in and go and see what it's like on the road. As talked about in the intro, this is my first time behind the wheel of a Honda, apart from my brother's one in Australia, and it's quite good in a way because it's given me a clean slate to compare it to a lot of the German cars that I'm used to. And I have to say, right off the bat, the build quality in here is really, really nice. I haven't had time to play with the infotainment system, etc., so you have to watch other reviews for that. But in terms of the touch points, the fit and finish, it seems really nice. The wheel is lovely, super thin rim, which you know I rave about all the time, very similar to something you'd find on a Porsche, which is obviously a plus point, and everything seems where you kind of want it to be. The driving position is brilliant. You know I bang on about that all the time, and I was worried that trying a Japanese hot hatch, I might be sitting here awkwardly because Japanese cars of the past, for sure, like S2000s, etc. Well, I had no chance of fitting in one of those. So it's really nice and refreshing to get in this and feel super comfortable and also know that I'll be fine with a helmet on later on when we hit the track. The seats themselves feel fantastic. Probably not to everyone's liking in this red color, but it does sort of brighten up the interior a bit. And once again, it's very, let's call it Type R. I'm currently in comfort and the ride quality is really comfortable. It's very supple and not what you would expect from something that is supposedly going to be very sharp-edged on track a bit later on. Obviously, as you cycle up through the modes, go into sport and everything stiffens up a bit more, the throttle response becomes a bit sharper, steering maybe feels like it's got a bit more weight in it, which I'm not always a fan of with electric steering, but it's not horrendous, it doesn't feel too artificial. And then, wow, there is a tank. Oh, wow. Yep, that's the first time I think I've had a live tank on the channel. The driving modes are really good. You can feel the difference between them. There's an individual mode there as well, so I'm sure you can configure most of your favorite settings on that. The gearbox, well, I'd read and heard good things about this manual 6-speed box because essentially it's the same box that was in the FK8 that was the predecessor of this car, and I can see why. It is so nice, and I have to say it's as good, if not better, than something you'd find in Porsche's GT3 or GT4, their 6-speed manual box. It's that good, and in many ways it actually feels a bit better as a road car box. I don't know, the jury's out for that. I need to spend more time in this car, but it's a lovely, lovely gearbox, really nice, reasonably light clutch. I haven't tried to heel and toe because I've got other things to look out for, like tanks, but the pedals seem like they're spaced quite well, and obviously because the driving position's pretty good, that's going to set you up for decent heel and toe if you want to use that. But yeah, overall on this short drive in this horrific weather, I think it's a really lovely package. Something we did notice off camera on the way down here was there was a fair amount of tyre roar on quite a coarse tarmac surface. So I'm sure you'd probably hear that in most cars, but it did seem pretty loud in this car. And that's really one of the only negatives that I can pull out from my short time behind the wheel. I think they say it averages about 34 on the combined cycle, and WLTP figures seem to be reasonably accurate these days, so I couldn't tell you if that's right or wrong. In terms of the engine, well, that's fourth out of here and up to 60 miles an hour. Plenty of pull, plenty of torque as you'd expect, because unlike Type Rs of old, it's turbocharged these days, so you've got that lovely low down torque. When we came down here, we hit a little bit of dual carriageway. We're sitting at 70 miles an hour, and in 6th gear, it was revving at about 2,800 RPM. So it does rev a little bit highly. If you do a lot of road trips, go through France at 85 miles an hour, you're going to be sitting at 3.2, 3.3, which will chew through petrol and might get a little bit frustrating. I wish sometimes that manufacturers would give you like almost an overdrive for the 6th gear, but that's a tiny little complaint. I'm just obviously trying to come up with a couple of negatives because I think it's really, really impressive. I'd like to try this car again when the weather gets a bit better and spend a bit more time with it, get under its skin a bit more, because I think it has a lot of potential. It's a lovely, lovely bit of kit. The one elephant in the room though, and it's something we talked about briefly in the intro, is the price. 47 grand, or about 48 with this white paintwork. It's a lot of money for a hot hatch. It's a lot of money for a hot hatch that doesn't have a German badge on it, and that's nothing against Honda, because they've always made some of the best hot hatches on the planet, but you'd expect it to be a bit more affordable, let's say. But saying that, strangely, when you compare it to something like Hyundai's i30N that's recently been refreshed, that's 11 grand cheaper. But when you look at the two cars on finance, which most people buy cars on these days, there's actually not a massive difference in monthlies with a similar sort of deposit. So that tells me that this car's residuals are going to be a lot better. Now we're on that rough surface again, and hopefully you can hear some of that coming through my mic. It is very loud actually. We're just sitting at 50 and you would struggle to have a clear conversation in here. So that's obviously a slight bit of an issue if you live with this car every day, but that probably translates to a bit more sound from the engine exhaust when you're actually on the move and having fun in this car. I'm going to leave the road section here and hand over to Lawrence, who's a journalist sitting next to me, and I will join you on the track and hope that this rain at least slows down a little bit. Right then guys, you join me on a very wet and slippery Thruxton. This is my first time around here. I've literally done a handful of laps in the FK8, which was this car's predecessor, and I was massively impressed with what that car was doing. Thankfully we got Michelin's PS4S tyres on, which thrive in these conditions, but there's not much grip out there on the tarmac. As far as the car, well, it just feels epic. It really does. I would say the FK8's got maybe a little bit more steering feel than this, and I seem to gel with that one a bit quicker, but this feels like it's more capable. It just seems to do everything so well and so easily. As I come into here at God knows what speed, it's so nice. Loves a bit of trail braking in here. Those dark bit of tarmac are the slippery ones. As I understeer a little bit through there, but I can feel what's going on underneath me. I'm in R mode, which essentially is, I guess, like Sport Plus with BMW. So it allows a little bit of slip. Everything feels tight. The throttle response is really sharp. And I'm just really, really impressed with this car. But like so many of these press launchers, there's so much to take in such a short amount of time. I'm gonna have to come back to here, practice on Thruxton, get to know it a little bit better, because it's epic. This in the dry must be scary. Gear changes, as they were on the road, just sublime. Really, really lovely. I would say they're actually better than a Porsche GT4 or Porsche's manual 6-speed box, which is a massive compliment. It just feels so well put together, this car. Even the driving position is good as we get a little bit sideways through there. My instructor's very patient sitting next to me. These are like nightmare conditions for an instructor, I can imagine, with randoms sitting next to them. But this is just awesome. Really, really impressed. Yes, it might be 47 grand, but you could use your Type R for literally everything and take it to your track day. And it should hold out pretty well. I could drive around here all day long. It's putting a smile on my face, and that's the most important thing. Well guys, I hope you've enjoyed this first drive video on Honda's brand new Civic Type R FL5. I've certainly enjoyed my day, even though the weather hasn't been playing ball. I've had plenty of fun, and I've really discovered that this car is a serious bit of kit, as I completely get my braking markers wrong. I thought I was at a different part of the circuit then.
I was just going to say, he's going a bit deeper this time.
You're like, are we on the qualifying lap? Anyway, I'm going to leave it there, guys. It's been an awesome, awesome day. I hope you've enjoyed this first drive video. Leave any comments and questions below, and I'll see you at another video very, very soon. Cheers. Wow, there is a tank. Oh, wow. Yep, that's the first time I think I've had a live tank on the channel. Anyway, literally everything that's tried to distract me today has distracted me, whether it's the weather or running around like a crazy person or a tank driving right in front of me. Let's get back to the car.